have it, even though we may not practice it in an extreme level, it's still, you still kind of have some of those preconceptions. So it's and it's a learned thing. It's learned through when you look at TV or when you see ads, anything like that. But I think it's learned, or some things that your parents may say. There was that one movie, American History X.
Oh yeah, with Eddie Norton.
That little clip, and he's like, "Oh, you know what? I'm thinking about it," and he realized that his dad had racist views or whatever, and would say things, not saying, "Oh, you have to go out and kill these people" or whatever. It was just he had his bias, and he would talk about it, so it became okay in the household, and it became something that's how you classify people or something. But I think it's taught. I don't think you're born just hating people for no reason.
Okay.
I think it's taught, and I think for many of us, we are or have been racist and not even known it, because it is taught or experienced. Maybe it's the television. I think I said last time we talked, I grew up in a very small town in Iowa, and there was only one race, and it was the human race. It was all white. And not until I was in high school did I interact with women who were of a different race than I. So I had no awareness until I got older that I might have looked at things differently than I thought I did. That's not making sense. Or until now. I think there are many of us who don't know they are, and now we're having a conversation. And a conversation that says, you're not bad if you think that way, but let's explore why you think that way, or how those thoughts came to be in your life. I think that's, for my age, that's what's going on now, I think.
Well, it's that one book I was looking at, White Fragility, and it's talking about privilege and not really even knowing you have that privilege, because, like you said, you never had to think about your race, how you appear to other people. When I go anywhere, it's automatic. Oh, where are you from? Well, I'm from the United States. Yeah, but where? Where are your parents from? The United States. But where are you from? It's assumed that American looks a particular way, and that's, you know, that again, that's just taught, created.
I mean, I do think it's interesting what you're saying. I think you were kind of, Sherry, you were kind of saying like, oh, like, why is it that that's taught? And I think that's also really interesting to think about. And I think something I've been thinking about is, you know, I often feel we often act from places of fear and survival, and, you know, and I think if you're taught that if we're separate groups, if you're taught that we're not all biologically humans, right? We're all, you know, if you're taught that, oh, we should see each other in these separate groups, I think then you can also be taught other things like, oh, well, resources are scarce, and if another group has access to these resources, or if they find success, then that takes away from your chance of success or resources. And I don't think it's true, but I do think that I think that sometimes part of that, you know, that's like when, I don't know. I mean, that's what my thoughts are. I mean, I think when I hear this whole argument where people they're against immigrants in our country, I think that's a very obvious show of, well, they're afraid of losing something, even though what they're afraid of losing, it's not accurate that they're actually losing anything, but they're projecting that fear onto a group of people, versus looking at their government and asking, why isn't my government actually making my life easier? You know, stop pointing fingers at groups and people, and rather think about like the bigger system and picture. So I don't know. I think it's fear that's been manifested in a really twisted way.
Yeah, I think you guys are making some interesting points. And Jennifer, I wanted to thank you for bringing your your thoughts up, because in my mind, when I was asking the question, I was thinking more, I don't know, like hardcore racist, whatever that is. But it's like everybody to some extent has some sort of racial bias in their head from somewhere, or some thought that is inherently racist. But like if you look at it closer, like maybe that doesn't make so much sense. And so thank you for like bringing that out and kind of like backing me out and helping me look at things in a different way. But it's like yeah, you get taught, and it can be very subtle. Like, Michelle, I don't really think people teach you, like they sit you down and like, Michelle, look, here's racist, and here's the bottom race, and here's the next race, and then you got to treat them. I don't, it's not like that. It's these like subtle examples, or the way people talk, or how like we stand around other people, and like at the bus stop, maybe we like move a little further away from people and stuff like that. And you learn by like figuring it out, I think, over time. And you may not be doing it on purpose. Maybe you're 4 years old when this is happening, and you're like, why is this happening? And you're starting to like try to just piece the world together. But we have interesting perspectives based on our experience. And one of the things that I've been thinking in my mind that's really interesting is like we're allowed to think whatever we want, at least in the United States. And technically, like it's like I don't really think there is a really bad thing about being racist, because I feel to a large extent, if you were raised in a place that put racist ideas into you, you had no control over that. And you shouldn't like wake up when you're 20 years old, realize that you have some sort of racism in your head, and then be punished for it because you were raised as like a small child to have that. I do think that going out in the world and doing things that are racist is not good. But sometimes you get an idea in your head, and it's not even just racist. It could be, I don't know, something based on astrology, or it could be a religious idea, or it can be that when you stomp on your gas pedal harder, it'll help your car start. We get all these ideas in our heads that may not be realistic. And I think it's not the worst thing to have an unrealistic idea in your head, but I think it's more about looking at the behavior that people have in terms of racism. And I don't really like saying you're a racist because you have thoughts. That's not good. I don't like you. I think like you're doing things that are hurting other people specifically because of their race. That's not good.
Well, I think where it comes into play is, I mean, people have whatever thoughts they have. The dangerous part is when you have thoughts about somebody else. Your reflection or your outlook about other people, that is where you kind of start the slippery slope, because who knows where that is in terms of how your actions are carried out. It's not just racism, it can be misogyny, can be, because, and that's something that in many cases can be even worse. Because I've seen people in situations that are misogynistic and they don't know in the moment. They're just kind of like, well, this is just the way I was raised, and this is they in their eyes, what they see as right and wrong are very different than what many other people see. And that part is kind of hard, because of how you show somebody that very thing that they think they're doing correctly is not.
Can't hear.
So yeah, I think if you get excited, or if you get offended, which I think offended is another form of excited, it can be hard to like pause and be like, well, wait a second, like could that have just as easily been me if I was born in another family? Like, is this person just doing what they think makes sense? Which I'm not saying is a good thing, but sometimes I think in the last talk, the last session we had, there was some talk about how some people were asking questions that were not very, I guess, well informed of some of the social justice issues, and because of kind of their stance in life, maybe their complexion and whatnot, they were met with some opposition. Like, how dare you ask these questions? You don't know this already. They were lighter complexion. And I think sorry, there's people like joining, so I'm also managing people joining. To say that there's like information, hey Jaime, that everybody needs to know, and if you don't know this, you're bad, or there's information that if you think a certain thought, then it's like, how dare you think a certain thought? I really think that's very dangerous, and I think that's very closely aligned with censorship. I think it is censorship. And I'm not saying I agree with being racist or saying one thing is better than another because of skin color or gender or something like that. But I do think to an extent we should allow people to be who they are, and maybe talk to them and meet them where they're at and try to understand them and say, like, why do you think these things? I think that's a lot more challenging and time consuming, but it can be more effective in the long run. And yeah, I was kind of just bring that idea out. I think it's something that was on my mind.
But yeah, if you're attacked constantly because you have whatever you say, because we all dance around the race talk, right? We don't want to say colors or this or anything that's going to offend people. But yeah, that can make it off-putting. So then people don't want to talk about race. They want to talk about social issues because they're going to touch a nerve, and then they're going to get whatever attacked for being so narrow-minded or whatever. But that's part of the discussion is if you're not aware, you need to ask those questions. And as someone who maybe does understand that topic, then that's on you to kind of have the patience and explain if they're truly interested in learning. And there was actually something I learned in my communications course, and how when we choose certain words, we are giving our opinion in that word. Like, for instance, when you say something's inexpensive versus something's cheap, there's a connotation to one or the other. And so it's giving your opinion without really knowing, because maybe that's the word that you learned. I think my dad still says Oriental. I'm like, that's not the word we use anymore. But, it is what it is. It's a different generation.
I think so, Jordan, when you were saying that, we should let people be who they are. Now, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but I guess my question is, what if people's beliefs are damaging to the majority? So like when we're talking about people who may be racist and upholding a white supremacist sort of standard, that is pretty damaging, right, to a lot of communities. And so I'm not saying that racists aren't human or that they're bad. And I agree with you in that I don't think people really even realize they might be racist. I think it's just something that is understood, like this is how they were raised, like what we've been talking about. But yeah, for example, I found out I had a Facebook friend I didn't know I had. This is from a long time ago. I think it was a photographer that had added me like years ago. And so she pops up on my feed, and she's basically saying that she doesn't think George Floyd died. And so she's definitely into some conspiracy theory stuff. And at first I was like, I'm just going to ignore this. Like, this is crazy. But then I decided to look at the comments, and it was just horrific. It was like just dehumanizing. And they were posting like body part comparisons to try and say that he wasn't really there. And I don't even really want to talk about it that much because it's pretty terrible, but I felt like I need to address this. And, I was talking to them, and they were saying, no, this post is about revealing the truth. And I was like, no, I think this post is anti-Black, and it's disguised as something that's supposed to be unveiling some hidden, secrets. And they did take offense to that. They were saying, like, we're not racist. And I was like, I didn't say that. I do think this post, though, is stemming from some kind of racism. I think the intent is to undermine the Black Lives Matter movement. And so yeah, I mean, we actually had a discussion. Like, it was, you know, we were both like, they actually were like, thank you for not calling us names. And I was like, no problem. I have lots more questions to ask you. I really don't agree with what you're saying. And in the end, one of the women I was talking to, she emailed me, and I haven't, or she didn't email me, she DM'd me, and I haven't responded to it, but it's just a lot of things that I don't even know how to tackle, or I don't believe in, but it does seem like it's stemming from, it's partly religious, and then it's also, there's conspiracy theory, and it's just so messy. And I do feel, I think she's in a minority, but I do think that kind of thinking, if it branches out and reaches other people and people start to subscribe to it, that could be damaging, you know? Again, like, I think, I don't know, I really think it was intended to undermine the Black Lives Matter movement, but people are pushing it out as like, oh, we've discovered another, like, you know, there's something secret that the Illuminati is doing. Sorry, sorry. I hope that's not offensive, but yeah. It was concerning. It was really concerning to me, and it was really just dehumanizing. Yeah.
To Jordan's point, right? It's not that that person was necessarily evil. That's just they got that perspective and they thought it was, you know, true. We don't know what's true, what's not, right? But they thought, and it wasn't malicious, I guess is the thing, right? It's not a malicious intent. It's just, oh, this seemed plausible to me the way it was explained. And so that's why I'm subscribing to that. But I can see how you're saying, like, but if you make it sound plausible, then you're ignoring the bigger picture. You know, like when people say with George Floyd, well, he wasn't, you know, a model citizen. Okay, neither was the guy who blew up, what was it, Timothy McVeigh, his accomplice has been in prison, is still in prison. Like 100 and something people they bombed, and we're still paying for him to be on death row, you know. But and this guy was just detained, and he was, you know, killed, murdered. So it's I think it's just that thing where it's not malicious. They just think that it's plausible or I don't know. I don't think necessarily like I want to turn America one way all the time. I think there are people who think that way, but there are some people who just honestly think somebody might be mistaken and they're not trying to hurt anybody. They don't realize that that thought is hurtful. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that is something actually, like I felt like, you know, I don't know if we're going, like me and this person can agree on what we believe, but I did say that, I mean, what I'm reading is very offensive to me. And they did respond to that. So that's where we were like, okay, I think we're acknowledging that we're not trying to hurt each other. I do think the beliefs can be damaging to society. I think that I do personally. But yeah, it's, I don't know. And I was very curious, how did she come to believe these things? And I think that goes back to that question. I don't know that I would call her a racist, and that's not her intent, but it's still that question of like, how do people come to these ideas?
Well, Michelle, when you say that those ideas can be hurtful to like society, what do you mean by that?
So for me personally, I think that, you know, well, she was saying that she thinks that Democrats are part of like a Luciferian cult, and that she's very much for Republican. And I'm not, like, I have relatives that are Republican and Democrat, and I am, I guess I would say I'm Democrat, or I would vote Democrat, but, you know, like, I imagine she's probably going to vote for Trump. Like, she probably thinks that what he's upholding goes along with her values, right? And I personally do think that Trump is an incredibly damaging leader, you know, whether like Republican or not, you know, and I think it is okay. Like, that's not even my issue here that he's Republican. It's just like him as an individual. I think he's incredibly damaging as a person to our society. And because he represents the Republican Party right now, and I think people who are subscribing to these conspiracy theories might, you know, see him as an ally in those beliefs, they would then vote for him. And so I think that's why I say stuff like that can be, and other things, but that would be the easiest way to put it. Yeah.
And
Oh.
unfortunately, there's a whole lot more of that out there. I tend to do a limited amount of Facebook, and most of my Facebook friends think about the same way I do. But periodically, I get caught up in something, and I'm just, oh my God, people really believe those things. They really talk about the conspiracy things, or I saw something recently comparing George Floyd's death and all the not excitement, all of the publicity around it and all of the power that it has garnered to men and women who have died in battle and not been celebrated. And that seemed like such an incredible stretch. But I don't think that's limited. So I do think there's a lot of thoughts and beliefs that are harmful, however they came about. It's them and us. It's my way or the highway, kind of speaking. So I think it's all right to say, I feel some of these things are frightening. I think some of these beliefs are dangerous, and to acknowledge that. I don't know what I can do about it other than be more aware when I'm in conversation of not just letting conversation flow by me, but challenging a bit and saying, what do you really mean? How did you come to that idea?
That's the thing though, right? It's more, it's not to, because if somebody is saying something that's hurtful and hateful, then you turn around and say, well, that's wrong and bad and you shouldn't be that way. You're doing the same thing. You just want to
Yes, exactly.
more like, oh, well, okay, that could be damaging because of this. Have you considered it from this point of view? I think that's have a discussion versus this like shouting match of who's wrong or who's right.
Yeah, like I think I went on a little rant last week talking about, and I think comes up with what Sherry was talking in response to what Michelle is saying, where it can be difficult to listen to people who believe things that you don't believe. Like for instance, if you don't believe in religion, it can be difficult to sit in a church service and listen to people believe all of the goodness of heaven and all those kind of things. It can be just be difficult. Like, you guys really believe this? But maybe they do, maybe they don't. And to having like damaging beliefs, Michelle, I think that is very, I think to me that's a valid concern. But there's this idea in my mind where you can think whatever you want, and it could be the craziest thing on the planet. You're allowed to think what you want, is your mind. But once you start having an effect on reality, like if I think black people are terrible, and then I go start lynching black people, like me thinking black people are terrible, okay, but me lynching black people, that's bad, and it could be based on this. So then sometimes we make the mistake of thinking this is bad, but I think there is that point in between those two where there's like the action and the thought, where sometimes our thought is also an action, where it's like there's this idea where if somebody yells fire in a crowded place and there's no fire, everybody might think there's a fire and cause a panic, and it might hurt people. And they didn't like do anything, like they didn't lynch anybody or anything like that, but they shared an idea and it caused damage.
Yeah.
And so there's certain ways where you can share ideas that are damaging, but I think to lean towards censoring people because there's a risk of a belief being damaging, I think is something that can be done. And I don't think it's that hard to do, but I don't think that it, in my opinion, brings the person that is on the other side, it doesn't create a conversation with them. It doesn't help them to more understanding. And it's super difficult, because if somebody says something like super insulting to me, of course I want to be defensive and be like, how dare you, I'm offended. But the hard part, I think, is that people that are patient, people that read, people that do research, people that can calm themselves down, I think often fall into this comfort zone of not getting out there and spreading their ideas and starting conversations and starting dialogues. And then the people that are doing stuff we don't like are doing that. And if that happens for long enough, it can create this situation or this climate, this echo chamber, this polarization, whatever word you want to use, that creates a dangerous mass of action or potential for danger. But I think if we think a certain set of ideas or beliefs or ways of thinking is good, and more people should do this because it's better for everybody and stuff, it's our responsibility. It's not the government's responsibility. It may seem like it, but the government is naturally made to control things, and they'll always want to just control things more. It's the people's job to spread the ideas that they think are good, and that's everybody's job. And everybody has a different idea of good. And if I've been spreading my ideas for the last 20 years, and you have not, and you've just been like, oh man, Jordan's ideas are so terrible, why is he sharing those? But you haven't been kind of countering that. It's like you watching somebody get attacked on the side of the street and you're not doing anything. Where sometimes, maybe you're afraid of getting attacked. There's all these factors. I'm not trying to simplify it into one thing, but I think, Michelle, what you're doing by talking to people and engaging with them and trying to understand them, I think that's super tough. And I think that is extremely important to talk to people like they're people. And sometimes it's not about race. Some people are just conspiracy theorists, and this is the latest conspiracy theory. And it happens to be involving race. So that gets mixed up. Like a couple of months ago, there was this conspiracy called coronavirus. And a bunch of people didn't believe in that. But that didn't mean they were like anti-medical. It just like the climate, the way that it came out, it may not have, the information they knew, they may have just made conclusions that may not have aligned with what the CDC said.
I mean, I think I agree with what you're saying, but I do think that the way the post read, whoever the originator of the post was, I think there was an intent to undermine the Black Lives Matter movement. And as I talked to her, because we did talk further, and I'm not trying to say I wasn't listening. I was listening to what you're saying, but just to quickly clarify that. But yeah, when I asked her more questions, she did say that she thinks that I don't know. She thinks that there are secret players that are trying to create race wars. I'm here thinking there's been racial tension for a long time. This is not new, but for her, that was her perspective. So it was in the end, it was interesting because she didn't think it was about race, and I think that is fair. Like I don't think she understood herself to be racist. I don't think that was her intent. But in the end, it did come back around to somehow being about race. So I don't know, but what you are saying is true. It isn't always about race. No.
Also, I do want to say everything's on a case-by-case basis, and I have not read this post. So I'm not saying you're wrong or you're right. I'm just like of a general summary of what you're saying. I'm giving some feedback. I mean, you could be like super in the right because I have not read this post or talked to this person. But I think taking that step to actually read the post, don't just like read the first all caps sentence and be like, this person's a racist, unfriend. Like you're contributing to the echo chamber by like splitting yourself away from all the people who don't agree with what you agree with. Yeah. And by like talking to them, engaging with them, maybe they are racist, maybe they're a danger to society, maybe they have a sniper rifle, I don't know. But I don't think we should assume those things. And I understand, like, if we feel like our safety is in jeopardy or something like that, maybe tread a little cautiously or call the police or something like that. But I think it's very good to actually go and do some research, do the talking, and really get a good, like, I've talked to this person for an hour. I think they have some racial bias.
Yeah.
That was actually a good example there, Jordan, in terms of the fact that you clarified the fact that you may not have the full context by having gone through the experience that Michelle did, reading and talking to the person, versus there are a lot of people in a situation where those like, no, that's not what they meant, and like that's not what they were going for. And it's like you haven't even read all the information, you didn't have the experience, you weren't there. There's so many times where I see people arguing online about situations that they weren't a part of, that they're hearing about through secondhand, third hand, that you're seeing through clips, and it's kind of this spiral of whatever. You can have obviously an initial perspective, point of view, but if you don't make that initial jump to say, well, hey, let me get more information, or let me get close to figuring out how many other possibilities there could be for this, it starts to muddy the water, and you get from a point of it being, it's kind of like those telephone games where somebody says one particular thing and then it snowballs and snowballs and snowballs, and all of a sudden we're down the street talking about something totally different.
And two people can hear the same thing and have two completely different perceptions. And that's the thing, is you want to do that perception check. Like, what did you get from that post? What did you understand? Because I understood this. And then they'd be like, oh, I didn't even get that. I didn't see that. You know, even when you're sending a text, you say something and somebody was like, what? And you're like, no, that's not what I meant. I meant this. Or, you know, and there's things that are lost, especially in written comments like that, because you're losing all the nonverbal cues and all that stuff. Perception checking is a good tool.
Yes. I particularly had a hard time when I was younger with text messages because I would use grammar. And so then people would like not want to text me because they thought that I was always mad at them. But I didn't get the memo that you weren't supposed to use grammar and you were supposed to replace that with different versions of smiley faces to like prove that you weren't mad. And yeah, I've learned that kind of stuff over the years, but like there was like a real like, I will be here. Where are you going to be? And then like, are you mad at me? And it's like, what do you? And perception is a real thing. And what they're taking from it, their ability to understand something. Sometimes like your experience gives you the ability to understand something and they don't have that experience. And so when they read something, they're looking at it from their experience and it falls here. But in your experience, it falls here. And you read two totally different things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a really good point.
That's very good.
I think one thing I would have to ask everyone is, what do you think is the best way to approach information online? Like, for example, knowing where you're getting information from, if it is like a legitimate source, or what the purpose of it is. The reason why I asked is because I was talking to someone I know, I want to say about a week ago, and he was talking kind of borderline conspiracy theories. And I was kind of diving into, well, where are you getting this information from? And then he mentioned this site called InfoWars. And I was like, okay, I know I've heard that. Like, I've never really watched or dived into it. So I was like, this kind of rings a bell. So, like, oh, okay, just give me a second. Let me pull up real quick. And then I happened to, like, do a Google search. I mean, I initially found Alex Jones's face. Like, the first thing that pops up, I was like, hey, I know this guy. Like, isn't he the one that like got banned on Twitter and YouTube and a bunch of other places? And so I went and asked the guy about it. He said that apparently there was some big conspiracy about that, where some like these companies were all collaborating with each other to silence the truth, and it kind of spiraled into this other like separate thing. And so, but I wasn't able to really resolve the situation with that. But it had me wondering, kind of like, maybe the next time I talk in like this group chat with you guys, I throw that question out. But how do you how do you vet a source, basically?
Well, I think in my mind, which is something that I have been trying to find a way to express in terms of like, I think I have a thing in my mind that's good and I need to share it, because if I don't, then all the other people sharing their stuff that I don't think is good will get the power and all that kind of stuff. when you're looking to get information, if you're trying to get accurate information, I think before you go and try and look up information, you should understand the process of getting good information and like understand how to do research, which is a thing that I think, much like listening, is something that a lot of people think they know how to do, but is a skill. And it's something you need to practice often because the rules change all the time. And in terms of doing good research, I would say that it's never good research to draw conclusions based on one source or one study. Um, it's never good research to only look at sources that come from one perspective. And you can do checks pretty easily. Like if you're talking about political stuff and you type, you can check what the main opinion of certain like news outlets are. And if all of your sources are conservative, like everybody checks out to say they're conservative, which is doing research on your research, then, and that's what you're making your entire opinion on, then your opinion is biased because you're only looking at, even if you looked at 100 sources, they're only conservative. So trying to look at like, what's the whole spectrum? What am I trying to learn? And then look at multiple sources. And the more sources that say the same thing, especially if they say it in different ways. And some people say they don't like it, and some people say they do like it. It is probably a real thing. Whether or not it's good or bad, that's the opinion part. But like if people are talking about the same thing over and over and over, and everybody's talking about it, and there's 45 videos from different angles, it's probably more likely to be real. And this kind of folds back, Michelle, into the scientific method. But I really think like taking the patient understanding and like understanding what is garbage and what doesn't make sense, and what is understanding is stuff that does make sense but you don't like. I think oftentimes we want something to be true, and so we'll do that thing where we get all the conservative sources because they align with what I want to be true. Or I had a talk with somebody about the environment, and they said they did all this research and they couldn't understand that the environment was going bad. There's like, it seemed like fake stuff that people were saying. And I was like, where'd you do your research? And he brought up a bunch of political sources. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to explain something to you. And so I spent the next like 45 minutes explaining like where I did my research, which was from like science journals, and understanding like by reading about biology and learning like how the environment works, and then looking at science statistics. And I didn't look at any politics at all because the environment is not a political issue. And I was like, this, and this. This, and this. This is definitely caused by humans because if you look at the trends of the existence of this molecule, like a chlorofluorocarbon, which is the kind of thing in aerosols in the 50s, those did not exist in any high concentration above 1 part per million before the 1900s. And then like after the 1900s, it's in like more than 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 parts per million. And it's like the order of magnitude increases. And then, oh, what happened around the 50s? We started making those. And it's like, that's a big clue that humans might be involved in, and chlorofluorocarbons are big greenhouse gases, and we've proved that. And here's some articles to say that this is bad. And it's like, that I think is like, that's doing research, not talking to somebody or listening to a newscast from somebody who's like not a scientist about a science issue. Like, go to sources that are credible, like listen to the CDC about coronavirus. Don't listen to your mayor. Your mayor's not a scientist. That's my opinion. And sometimes I think we get caught up in listening to our mayor because he's an authority figure, but he's not an authority on the question we're trying to ask. And I would say, like, try to kind of guide this person maybe to a more logical way of, not necessarily tell them what to think, but kind of just guide them to a method of research that makes more sense. If it doesn't make sense.
I I think one thing that is tricky, and this is like kind of going back to what Rocky was saying, engaging with people on the internet who, may not have sources you consider credible. I mean, what if those same people also just don't believe your sources are credible, wherever they're coming from? That becomes like a really difficult hurdle to overcome. It's like, how do I prove this to you? Because now it's rooted in a belief that they just believe, like, the media, it's all crooked and none of it can be true. And I don't know why they consider the sources that they're finding to be like the exception. I mean, that would maybe that would be the question, is like, why is that the exception? What is it about these sources that you feel is more trustworthy? Because couldn't you just say that about any source at this point? Like, how do you know? But yeah, I think that's where I hit a wall with the person I was talking to, for example. I mean, they were saying that we're being censored and we're not allowed to share these links that we found. And, all the media, it's like all been overrun by these devious players. And so I don't know.
Well, Michelle, I've often found, this is not always true, but I've often found the more extreme someone's opinion is, the less they know about the other side. And instead of like attacking them with the other side, like, that's not true, this is true, just ask them about the other side. And like, like, Rocky, your beliefs are ridiculous and crazy to me. And I'm like, huh, yeah. Why don't you think the other side, like be curious, like, hey, they could be right, listen as if they could be right, and then ask them to explain why they're right and contrast it. And if they really can't come up with any facts whatsoever about the other side, even if it's a conspiracy, because I would say if you did good research, you also read the conspiracies and you said, I read them and I didn't think they were good. I respect that. I think if you really want an opinion, you have to, if you want to have a good idea of what's happening, you have to read the good, bad, and the crazy. And then you have to say, like, I read it and I don't think that it was good. And if they didn't do that, I think the argument of like, you have biased information because you didn't look at everything. I'm not saying you're wrong, but you obviously did not look at everything, because the articles I read had facts that you didn't know. But don't do it in a way where you're like waiting for them to like fall into a trap and then like, I got you. You didn't know. You're crazy. Like, don't do that. But maybe that's kind of like sometimes when they have to say it out loud, then they start realizing that they don't really know.
And it might not have to write that in there either. You're sharing your information. They may think about it later, because in the heat of the moment, you want to keep fighting for your side because you're right. A lot of people, we just fight because we're right. We want to be right. We think we're right and we're right. And then later on, we might think about it and say, okay, they had a good point there. I've never considered that. Because in the heat of the moment, it's hard to, I guess, just listen. So don't let that discourage you either. And don't don't get stuck in being right either, because you can do that too, where it's like, no, you're wrong. You're great. And now you guys aren't you're gonna listen to each other. That's difficult. It is so difficult when somebody's saying something that you feel so strongly against, or whatever, you have so much emotion attached to it, to step back and monitor your reaction and kind of, okay, all right, because again, they feel just that strongly as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Jennifer and with Jordan. That seems to be not necessarily a foolproof approach, but it seems to be the best one, because I worked with someone who was like a diehard flat earther, and then once he like let me know that that's kind of what he was convinced on, I kind of just had him walk through his argument for why, and then at certain points there were certain inconsistencies that I would ask him about. I wouldn't point it out. I would just ask him, like, wait, so if this is the case, then why is why? And then at some point, once he started to hit those walls, he was kind of, I'm not sure about that. Let me go research it again. We'll come back, go into it more, and it's like, okay, well, eventually you hit another wall. It's like, well, that still sounds like that's kind of inconsistent. And then eventually kind of gotten to the point where it wasn't like he was sold on the fact that it's not true, but at least he's at the point now where he's like, I don't know, man, maybe the world is round. He's like, okay, well, you take the ones where you can get them. So, but at the same time, we're still civil. It's not like some sort of beef where I have to say like, hey, you're stupid, or and he says, no, I'm stupid. You're still pretty civil and can kind of continue to go about our day.
I remember one time at work, my two coworkers, we were having a discussion about whether or not Thomas Jefferson was racist because he owned slaves. And one of my coworkers was just like, no, he was racist. How can you say that? Why didn't he put that in the, in the Constitution or the Independence? Why didn't we just say, everybody should be free and da-da-da? And my other coworker was like, no, there wasn't even racism back then. That wasn't, everybody was like that. Everybody owned slaves. He wasn't racist. And he goes, and he did try to protect Black people. He owned slaves and he was good to them. I don't know, whatever. He was owning on his thing. So I go, so are you saying kind of like you see him as maybe like a Schindler's List type thing where he was giving the facade that he was going along with the program, but let me also kind of under the radar save these people? Is that kind of what you're thinking that Thomas Jefferson was doing? He's like, well, yeah, it's possible. I was like, yeah, that's possible. So you can kind of see their point of view or understand why they believe something without actually agreeing with it. That's the other thing. It's just kind of like, oh, okay, I can see how you could make that connection. And all right.
Yeah, I think it was Jennifer that said like maybe like they get one new fact from you by approaching them in a way where like you're trying to understand them, and maybe they're not convinced, but maybe they go home and they think about it. And like I think everybody here is old. I don't know about Ryan, I haven't seen a picture, but maybe he's a baby, but everybody here is old enough to have like it taken a couple of swings to learn something. And this swing, like you learn this and this, and you're still confused. And the next one you learn this, and maybe 2 years go by and you put it away, and then like all of a sudden you're at a Thanksgiving party and then you learn this magical fourth thing, and it's and you're like, oh my gosh, that makes sense now. And sometimes, Michelle, you're here. This is the thing you need to give, and you need to give it. They're not going to get it right now, but if you don't give it, they're going to go even longer without getting to here. And I like what you were doing with the flat earthing, Rocky. That's like, to me, it can be very difficult, but this person, most of the time, people are not trying to spread craziness on purpose. Like if they're being adamant about something, even if it offends you, most of the time, they think it makes sense on some level. And by just going like, no, you don't make sense, that's dumb, you're wrong, like that's super offensive. Like if somebody said that to me about anything, I'd be like, you didn't even want to listen to me? Like I think I'm right, I think this is good. And I understand you might think it's bad, but let's talk about it. And like I would always want that for myself. No, and I fail sometimes. Sometimes I have like a everybody has that threshold. And when somebody pops above that threshold, you're like, hold my earrings. But this like trying as hard as you can to just be like, okay, like what does that mean? Like maybe you're right, maybe you have something there, and even if they're wrong, maybe they can give you a piece of information or some insight into the craziness, and that is why you guys believe that. Okay, now I know, and I have something that I can use to talk to somebody else with. Like so.
Because you need that other perspective to have, like you said, a full idea of, oh, okay. Because there's things where I'm like, how do you believe that? But I have to read a thing that they're saying. I'm like, oh, okay. So that's how you view it. Okay. Because I can't wrap my mind around certain things where I'm like, that is so clearly wrong. You know? But then I'll like see there with their point of view, and I'm like, oh, that's why. Okay. All right, I get it. I still have my opinion about it, but it's like, oh, okay. But and that's the thing, though. They're still human. You still have people have emotions. We have beliefs. They're strongly held, and most people aren't just straight up malicious, hateful. that just want to spread evil. Most people, they just believe it's true.
Again, I really enjoyed this. I need to check out. Thanks for the reminder, Rocky. I appreciate it. Everybody have a good week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Very good
Bye,
to see you.
Carrie.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, I think it's a tough thing to actually have evidence of what you want to have be true, and so sometimes we kind of jump the gun. But I think there's a lot of cases where somebody may have severe issues with rejection, and when you tell them no, or that their idea is wrong, they defend it because they have problems with rejection. And it has nothing to do with them being racist or them being sexist. It's something, it's like maybe they have an insecurity in their heart about you just not agreeing with them. And depending on the situation, just given that one example, somebody could puff their chest out and be like, no, I'm right, when you call them out on it, and it can seem like they're being racist and they're protecting their racism and whatnot. But maybe that's not the thing at all. And I think a lot of times, I've messed this up like hundreds of times in my life, and so I'm not like the perfect person on this, but taking the hit of offense, like they just wash you with this wave of offensiveness, and you're like, oh, and now you're soaking wet, and you're like, oh, and like try to not really react and try to understand. Even though your clothes are soaking wet and you want to go change and you want to say like, oh, you just put this whole tidal wave all over me, like don't, like try and continue to talk and try and don't switch to a different emotion. Sometimes emotions can make you want different things. Like before I wanted to talk to you, but now I'm emotional, so I want to prove that I'm right. And whoa, boy, that's hard. That's so difficult. Or like me, I don't really get like this. When I get emotional, I just want to leave. But that's also something that's not good, because it stops the conversation, and it creates animosity, or it creates hurt or offense or distance. And it's hard to recover. It makes everything harder. So it's very difficult, and it's very exhausting. So I'd say, make sure you had your breakfast, you had your Wheaties before you do this. But try, I would say, your best when you can, and you feel safe enough, when you feel strong enough, and when you feel like you can make a difference, to really just sit and talk to somebody and try to understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that. And with that conversation I was having, I did come at them like full Michelle Force, like, whoa, how dare you? I guess that's really only for you, but yeah, like, so I was just like, whoa. I wasn't name calling. I don't do that. Like, I don't, believe in like saying someone's stupid or anything. I don't think that gets anybody anywhere, but I was very direct in that I don't think this is right. And what ended up happening, but with the conversation, one of the people I was disagreeing with, when they said, oh, I'm really grateful that you're not name calling, that we're just having a discussion, that helped me. And I was like, oh, whoa, okay, wow, they just helped me. That's right, I should have a discussion. I should keep this as a discussion. I wasn't ever planning to start name calling or anything and being dismissive, but now that they've reminded me of that, I should start asking questions. And so it was at that point where I began sending a series of like inquiries, like, okay, well, what about this? And what's the grand scheme here? And why this? And why do you think this is? I mean, they're very willing to answer everything too. And I think, the conversation, though, we completely disagreed on almost everything. It was still, I hope they learned something from me. I now understand a little bit more of where they're coming from. It's still very confusing to me. Maybe I need to ask even more questions. But yeah, I don't know what that magical breathing exercise is. Maybe that's the next thing we need to talk about. Like, how do we, as soon as something triggers us or garners some kind of emotion, but there's a potential for conversation, like, like how do we set that up in our minds where we choose to step back and yes, just proceed, with openness and curiosity more than anything.
We're getting into the good part of the conversation now. Yes, that's the part I'm waiting for. That's a good question. I think for me, because I think like there's something called a tell, and you can look at that idea in different ways. Or sometimes people have tells where they do something and it may be involuntary, but it's a communication to you and you can understand information from it. And I think you have tells that you know about for yourself. And so like me, I guess I roll my eyes. And if I can catch myself rolling my eyes, I know that I'm getting more unstable or more angry or more upset. And so I've started to try and consciously like make a list of certain things that I do or certain thoughts that I have that let me know I'm getting out of control. And when that happens, then I like focus on that and I ask myself, well, what am I trying to accomplish here? And am I trying to get angry right now? And sometimes I like it's hard to like back yourself off the cliff. But to me, I'm trying to like catch myself before I get in too deep. And to me, that can be really helpful so that I'm like constantly monitoring myself. And then also kind of what those people, it sounds like we're doing with you in that conversation, where they kind of stopped the conversation, stepped outside of it, and then like appreciated you for just having a conversation. I don't know if you guys have ever been in like a tense situation and then somebody comes in strategic leadership mode and is like, I just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight and being respectful and doing all this and that. And then it calms everybody down. And it's not like, hey, be respectful. Stop saying that to females, blah, blah, blah. Like you come at it from the nice side and then everybody goes like, oh yeah, I wasn't doing that. No, I'm calm right now. Yeah, let's have a conversation. And that can be really helpful just to do that like periodically. If you're not sure, so you can throw something in like that and it takes the bubbles out of the pot so it doesn't boil over. Like open the top of the lid every now and then and let the bubbles go down. So, yeah.
Like that reminds me of a manager that I had. He would say that like when you get into really aggressive arguments with someone or you're shouting at them, if you want to try to defuse the situation, just like in the heat of the moment, say something really nice to them. It kind of throws off the whole argument. You're just like, wait, what? Are you guys been talking about whatever argument, whatever bills, whatever, and all of a sudden you just like talking about like, I really love when you cook for me. And they're just like, huh? What? Like, and it kind of throws them for that second. They have to take a breather and be like, where did that come from? And then obviously taking that moment where you're trying to figure out where did that come from, and then they come back to the situation, you're immediately a bit foolish.
And I would say that in most cases, it's extremely mature and always an option to realize this is too much right now and to step away and say, hey, can we talk about this later? I'm getting emotional, or hey, I can't talk about this right now. That's super fine, and it's okay, and it's not a sign of weakness. And sometimes by doing that, it lets everybody know, like, hey, Jordan wants to have a good conversation. This is a very emotional topic for him. He's acknowledging that, and he's trying to control himself. And when you come into it next time, if you do, then like everybody knows that I'm coming into it like, I'm trying not to get mad. I'm trying to talk to you. I proved that already. There's proof from the last conversation. But the nice thing, that's a good one. Maybe like if you can see that it's like a tense conversation, like already like kind of pick out a compliment and just have it like in the back of your head for when it gets too tense, and then just like throw it at them, and you're like, "You got a nice blouse on," and they're like, "That's true. Why did you say that?" Okay, that's some good strategy stuff. Has anybody had any? Michelle, you were explaining a conversation you had this week. Did anybody else have like kind of like experiences that they've been going through lately, or like good examples of how something went positive for them in terms of like social justice, or having people understand them, or diffusing situations?
Well, I mean, I had one conversation with someone where they were kind of debating, like what you were talking about, the term like racist, like is it, like what is it, what does it mean, and then they were kind of in passing, the concept came up that about, I guess, the discussion where how there's some people who believe that you apparently can't be racist towards whatever white people consider, and it's like this idea that racism doesn't exist towards white people. And it's like, well, I don't see how is that possible. How can you say that something works one way, but then you do the exact same thing and flip it the other way, and that's what's not also valid when you're just switching the people out. And what they were saying was, after further discussion, I was able to see that basically what they were equating was they were equating racism to a level of inequality. And what they were actually meant instead of racism was inequality. But in their minds, they were thinking because of, in this particular situation we were talking about, how things have happened, that kind of like, the example I brought to them was like, so what you're saying is that because you have two people who are in a race and they're at the starting line, and because you're in a situation where one person is at the starting block, and then another person got pushed backward 400 feet, you're then theoretically saying that there's no possible way that the person who got pushed back 400 feet could ever possibly cheat the person who's way ahead. And I was like, that's kind of the argument you're making. And he was like, well, yeah, like that's what. And he's like, okay, I see your point there. I'm not entirely sure that that's accurate, because say if he breaks the guy's leg, he can't finish the race. But in the situation of racism, it's more about your ideas and your thoughts than it is necessarily action. Like, you can still be racist and not doing it. But the belief system, as well as those being manifested into action. And like, for example, if you have a belief that you have one particular circumstance with someone who was white and they did something really wrong, and then you inherently start to believe that all the white people are equal, that is still racist. And it's like, oh, he's like, oh, okay. Having that conversation with him, he kind of broke down, well, where do you get this idea from? Where does it come from? Where did it start for you? And was able to kind of break down a lot of other situations that happened in his past, where it's kind of one thing after another after another. You can see where this particular belief had kind of been instilled in him through various situations. So it's kind of like how you were talking about if racism starts like because you learn it. And in this particular situation for him, it's something where he consistently experienced it. So he's like, if reality is telling me this, and I don't have anything else that's showing me the opposite, then isn't that the case? And it's like, well, I can totally disagree because I'm in a totally different scenario where it's like, no, there's more variables. Like, for example, in his case, just because of the limited experiences where he grew up, it was kind of only really two options. Like, you have, and in his particular case, the majority of the population where he lived happened to be African American, and most of them were considered to be lower to middle class or even in poverty. Then across town, the majority of the population happened to be Caucasian. That's the way the demographics work where he lived. And I explained to him that in this particular situation, most of the power dynamics where he lived operated in that way too, and many people who came from a situation of influence and power mistreated people who weren't. And I explained how, where in the situation that I live in, there's a lot more dynamics than just those two things going. Besides just the way you live, it can be your education level. It can be literally what location you live in. What your area code means a lot living in California. Where it's kind of strange how we live in a situation where within the same city or within neighboring cities, you can drive 5 minutes and it feel like it's a totally different world. And so after explaining that different experience to him, he kind of got more of the idea that maybe what he had been learning and the experience that had been instilled in him most of his life may not necessarily be the whole world, or it may not be accurate. And it was kind of that clash of like, no, I know what has happened. I've lived it, but I go to a totally different place and that's not the case. And in some cases, that may not be the majority of it. So it seemed to help him overall because you could tell that there was a lot of like pressure and tension that he kind of had been carrying with him like through his life.
It's like I think it's really good that we hear how the other people approach stuff, and like I think it's really helpful sometimes. Like there's certain cases in your life where you feel like you're the only person going through something, and then just learn, like you don't even get any solutions. You just learn that other people are going through it, and for whatever reason, the problem gets way more manageable because you're somehow not alone anymore. And in addition to that, I think in this case, how we've been talking about different situations and different scenarios and how we've been handling each one. And I thank you guys for not like judging anybody or saying like you should have acted this way. Why did you treat someone like that? It's like I wasn't there. But I get to listen to how people have their interactions and then get to ask them questions, and then I get to learn. And maybe Rocky, this seems to be like a technique of yours, like maybe by asking certain questions help the other person teach themselves. And so I think this is hopefully helpful to you guys. I think it's been helpful to me in terms of like man, sometimes it's interesting when you talk about something and then or somebody's talking to you and then like this situation from your life is like coming up in your head and you're like, yeah, I could have done that better based on what you're saying. I see where I went wrong. And you're like, oh dang it. So I think it's if I'm doing that in my head while you guys are talking, I feel like we're having a real conversation and we're not yelling at each other, because if we were yelling at each other, I wouldn't understand. I'd just be getting defensive, and I'd still host this thing because I'm the host, and I'd be like just waiting to turn it off. But like I wouldn't be like doing self-reflection. If I'm actually absorbing and doing self-reflection, we're having like a really good conversation, I feel. So just like, yeah, thank you for that. And it's just interesting to hear the different perspectives. So how are you guys doing? I forgot to do that. I apologize because Nana didn't do it for Sherry. But one of the things that I've been pushing as far as social justice is like do learning, try to learn good with other people, talk to them, but like also take care of yourself. It's hard to go do stuff if you're like dead. So take care of yourself, and take care of the people around you because they might need some help too. And so like how has this been for you guys? Not necessarily like are people attacking you, but like how do you guys feel about it? Maybe if people are attacking me and you want to share, you can say that, but hopefully that's not happening. But how has all this been? Has it been overwhelming? Have you found that doing a certain thing helps you really well, or maybe this herd thing is good and you like this and it's like doing some good self-care community kind of stuff for you? I think sometimes sharing those kind of things can help other people be like, oh, it's okay to admit that you're stressed out and go meditate and things like that. So yeah, I read science books. That helps me. I don't know why, but when I read science books and they like tell you about stuff that makes sense, to me it's just like, oh my gosh, there's still stuff that makes sense. This is so logical. I love this. And I just calm down.
It grounds you. Uh,
But
I mean, I've really appreciated these talks, and it is really nice to hear how other people are having conversations, because I do enjoy conversations and I do enjoy learning about other people's perspectives. I definitely have like my own, and I'll feel very strongly about them, but at the same time, um, I'm very curious as to how other people are understanding a different, or something similar in a different way. Um, and so I have appreciated, the techniques and, asking questions, maybe to have the other person better understand your perspective if they're hesitant. Also, I guess being open to the potential that you may need to learn something. But yeah. And then outside of that, I've been doing a lot of gardening, and that's I think like those are my science books. I've just been tending to plants. I have some potatoes growing. I don't know how that's going to work out. That was an experiment. I just literally threw potatoes on the ground outside, and they're sprouting. So we'll see.
I had a comment also to the question you posed just a few minutes ago, Jordan. I also feel the same way about what was just mentioned. I think I really appreciate and really enjoy these spaces in which we can just talk openly about how we're approaching the different social justice issues, and how I guess at an individual level, but also at an organizational level, whether that is at a nonprofit, I guess at a workplace, or even just joining like different panel sessions and having a conversation with a larger group of people that feel so passionate about what's going on. So yeah, that makes me feel, I think, really, really good. But then on the other hand, sometimes you still have to grapple with some of the realities, I think, at the workplace. Like sometimes you wish that like social justice, equity concerns could be addressed much quicker than what could actually happen in real life. Like I wish, like for example, we could have more. I wish I could address like environmental justice issues from one week to the next, and just start thinking about these like really grand ideas that we could do. And these are ideas I think that many academics talk about, many different nonprofits talk about, also about potentially implementing. Yeah, so it's been like it's been kind of odd. Like on one hand, you have people that are very passionate about it and starting to collaborate on different ideas and having like really fruitful conversations. But then on the other hand, there's all the roadblocks that are still there. I mean, I think we have made like a lot of progress in the past 2 weeks. Like, there are conversations happening that we hadn't had at a national level or state level. But then those roadblocks are still there. That's kind of been interesting in that sense.
Well, I would say this to you, Jaime. Thank you for chiming in. I appreciate that. These conversations, I think, are really important. I think the initial conversation that I had with Michelle that led to this was like, I felt like I wanted to do something really important, and talking to Michelle, like, we came to this idea that this was important, so let's do this. But kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, I don't really think these conversations have too much value if they stay in this conversation. I think the point of these is to give us good perspective, the people that show up to these, and like, this is like preaching to the choir kind of thing. The people that show up to these are the people that want to change and the people that want social justice and stuff. And we need to talk to each other about our experience, learn good ways of acting, and learn how to get better at our craft, and then go out and have the tough conversations with other people. Go out and not bash people on the head with righteousness, but start conversations. And if you're at dinner and somebody says something like completely outlandish, bust out some techniques on them and be like, yo, what does that mean? And like, really, like, because if you don't do that at the dinner, everybody at the dinner, they get another advertisement of the thing you don't like. And that keeps happening. Why do you think people buy Coca-Cola? Advertisement. And years and years and years of that, and now I'm a Coke drinker. And I think that's the same thing with racism. It's the same thing, I think, with almost everything. And so I'd say as much as we can, Rocky, I think there's some noise coming out of your computer. Trying to be the billboard for what you believe in, and not necessarily like kicking people, swatting people, and like busting their door down and being like righteousness to the face. Like, don't do that. But being the person that's always willing to listen, being the person that's always willing to give their opinion even when it's hard to give their opinion, being the person that's always willing to talk even after something has gone wrong, and being open and consistently sharing a certain I don't know how to say, like, welcomingness, where sometimes I get into conversations with people specifically because I hold spaces like this. And not because I said anything in the space, but because I'm making this effort to create spaces where we talk about positivity. People will come offline and talk to me, and we'll have good conversations about positivity, and then we'll move on. And maybe they learn something, or maybe I learn something new and whatever. But because I'm going out into the world and doing things, I think it kind of comes back and it helps to like spread the ideas that I want to share. I think in the end, like, no one idea is inherently better than another or more important than another. But depending on how we treat our ideas and how we push our ideas out, they do tend to start becoming more important or less important. And so if Michelle pushes her ideas, push, and I don't push my ideas, even though mine might make more sense, nobody's heard of them, and they're very used to Michelle's ideas, and so they're going to probably go with that because they're used to it. Just because they're used to it. There's an advertisement scheme for wealthy people sometimes where they just say stuff long enough to where there's never a time where anybody remembers when nobody said that, and then it becomes true. That's like a very high systematic level of like governmental advertising. But if you say something for 100 years straight, it's just a thing now. It's real, even if it's completely outlandish. And it's like the power of pushing ideas. You just push and you push and you push, and you may only get 1 millimeter a day, but do that for 100 years, and that's a lot of millimeters. So I think workplace, environmentalism, whatever you think is a good idea, Jaime, I applaud you for like having this passion and desire to go and like change the world. And I don't know exactly how to do that, but I think us trying and failing and making a new plan and never giving up, and if you see an opportunity to like try, is just really important.
Yeah, I think it's really great when in an organization you meet other people who are very like-minded and as passionate. But one of the big surprises that some people have mentioned to me is that when they try to have these conversations in their workplace, they're met with literally silence. Like, everyone's on the same page that we need to do something, but when it's time to actually have the conversation in, let's say, a Zoom meeting or a web meeting, there's silence. It's so strange. I think that's one of the biggest surprises I think I've heard about.
Is that surprising? That doesn't sound surprising to me.
No?
Because I feel like, especially at work, when you feel like your livelihood is somehow connected to what you do, like, okay, let's get up in front of all these people that, like, this is my livelihood. And if I say the wrong thing and I get ostracized and people don't want to work with me, that could, in the long term, be bad for me. And like, I could see that could be a real fear. But I think being that person, being that Rocky, like from this conversation, Rocky seems to be like excellent at this, to not be like, we're here to talk about deforestation and this is my idea and this is right. To be like, hey, we're here to talk. Thank you guys for coming. And, you know, let's just share it. Like, being that facilitator. Sometimes you need a facilitator. Like, if I didn't make this Zoom, we wouldn't be talking. Like, there almost always, for something new, needs to be a facilitator. For any major social justice movement, there needs to be a leader. There needs to be some focal point where if things go bad, you can like point it at them and it's okay. because then everybody feels safer. And sometimes it's really terrible to be that person, but sometimes it's very important. Morning, Nikki. So I'd
I
say
think sometimes maybe baby steps.
yeah, I don't know if you have spaces like that or Zoom calls where you talk about like social justice, environmental justice, and stuff like that. But sometimes just even getting people to sit and listen is like this huge thing, and it's like we're saying it's this thing. It's not this thing, but it's this thing. So, yep.
And so maybe having kind of just an impact of one person at a time might help. Instead of like trying to get a group of maybe like 20 or 30 people, it's more about just having that one-on-one conversation with somebody on Monday, another conversation with someone else on Tuesday, and just kind of building it that way. Hopefully, out of that, maybe one or two people the next week might become more regular. Then you have 3 or 4, you just kind of build the arsenal that way. I kind of feel like this is almost with spreading positive ideas and stuff. It's like we're trying to engineer the opposite of what we're doing with social distancing, where we're just kind of trying to keep everybody separated and stuff that's going to spread. We're trying to do the opposite of the ideas and say, like, hey, touch as many people as you can with these good ideas. It's going to be contagious at some point and it'll spread.
I gotta go, you guys. Great conversation.
It was nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you guys.
Yeah, bye. Nice meeting you.
Hi. Hi.
Okay. So I don't know if you guys want to talk about anything else. We can also talk about good stuff. This doesn't just have to be like struggle, how we are barely surviving in this climate kind of thing. I think there's plenty of good stuff going on. But I kind of pushed all the ideas I really wanted to talk about today. So what if you guys have bring up a question or
I'll just say, Jordan, thanks for doing these calls, because I think it's really important to talk about these things. And like you guys were saying before, sometimes it feels like it's just hopeless and you don't really know what to do next. But having a place to talk about it is nice. So thanks for hosting. You're muted.
I did want to say, because I haven't said it, if you go to the YouTube page, because I think sometimes you have like a super good conversation and then later you're like, you want to reference it, but you don't remember exactly what was said. So you're like, oh, there's a really good point that Rocky made about something, and this will really help me explain it to that person. But what did he say? All of these are on YouTube. So if you go to jordantremaine.com and then there's a little YouTube thing somewhere on that website, it'll lead you to basically every online discussion that I've ever had. And so if you thought this was really good, or if like Michelle, like maybe if Lisa wanted to check it out, see what she missed or whatever, I think if you can get someone to sit down and listen to Rocky talk about the understanding thing, that might help somebody be a little less difficult. If you're having a hard time, like sometimes I've learned, like I got a therapist recently, and I've learned that third parties sometimes have more weight. Like I know Michelle, I've known her for a long time. And so maybe if she's trying to tell me something, in my mind, I'm like, she has an angle because she knows me. She's trying to get this because she's mad at me for this. But like I could be thinking like that. But if there's a totally new person, then it's like, well, what do they have to gain from telling me the wrong thing? This is just a person speaking honestly. And so sometimes, like, if I'm trying to convince somebody that I know, it could be hard. But if I get somebody that, like, they don't know, then maybe they can listen to it without getting, like, this defensive from, like, wait a second, what are you trying to do? So, yeah. Shameless plug.
I think back to, I forgot, Tacos Against Cops. I forgot what your name is. Is it Jaime? Or, yeah, I think Jaime was making a point about when you get into that situation, you don't know like what comes next or what to do. I think what I probably will start doing with like each of these like groups I come to is like leaving my like IG and direct information. That way, like eventually with different people you connect with. I know like certain people in here I have already like seen. Oh yeah, I see you on IG. I connect with you. I connect with you. And then I know with my experience, there's situations I come across where I'll either have a conversation with someone or maybe want to like do a project, and it's like, you know what, I just connected with that person from a previous conversation. This might be something good to like tie them in. And so I think that that might be a good place to start, where if you have situations and like, so like now I already know it's like, okay, so I has interest in things that have to do with like our climate, any issues that are kind of important in that respect. And I know that, okay, well, obviously there's certain things that Jordan's more passionate about. Don't know what Nikki is passionate about, but I'm sure we'll find out at some point. And obviously from talking to Michelle, it's very clear the different things that she's passionate about. But I think kind of like connecting in that way, just building whatever, I guess reaching that olive branch out, whether it's the email, Instagram, Snapchat, I don't know. What else is this? Is anyone on TikTok? I've never been on TikTok, so. But whatever other social media platforms there are, that might be a good way to like get that next step, or like, well, what can I do going forward? Just connect with people.
Definitely. I don't know if you guys have ever experienced this, but like the power of a title where somebody's the general manager of the office, so when they speak it's more important, or some garbage like that. And some people really subscribe to that, and some people have a belief system based on like, you have this title, so I'm going to listen to you. You don't have this title, so I'm not going to listen to you. And I remember when I got my first job, I learned that. And what I used to do is I would tell someone something and they would be like, nah. And then I'd be like, okay. And then I'd go to my mentor and I'd tell him, and he would walk over and say verbatim what I said to that person. And that person would be like, oh, okay. And I didn't get mad at it because I understood that like they have this belief system where they trust this person, they believe this person. And I figured out this system where I could just go, because my mentor trusted me and he trusts him. And I'm not trying to be right. I'm trying to get him some information. And so I have to take this trip over here to my mentor and then back, but that's okay. And so, but with the connecting thing, Rocky, sometimes like if maybe having me say something is can help, or having somebody like, I hate to like say this like I'm like popular person or whatever, but like I host spaces, and by saying like, hey, this guy hosts spaces and I want you to talk to him, maybe that gets somebody to listen more. Or maybe like inviting them to a conversation like this, now that they're in this different environment, it helps them with understanding or coping or being open-minded and things like that. So sometimes being creative with the way that you try to connect with people, rather than saying like, this is my method and I'm going to move everybody with my method. Sometimes it's like, well, how is this person going to understand? Even if I really hate doing that, well, what am I trying to achieve? Am I trying to have a good time, or am I trying to get this person to understand? But don't put yourself in harm's way. Please don't do that. Take care of yourself. Love yourself. But like if you can, sometimes you have to do something that annoys you, or something that's a little bit like circuitous and the scenic route, but it really helps the other person to understand. So yeah, I'd say, yeah, if you, I think you guys all have my Instagram, but yeah, I'd say if you like each other, follow each other, DM each other, video chat with each other, go get coffee whenever it's safe to do that. Like, that's so important. Like, building community is like, I can't even describe how important that is. And it's not a thing that just happens. They're not like potatoes that you can just throw on the ground and then they just sprout up. It's not like that. You have to actively grow your community and you have to take care of it. Community is like orchids. Like, they'll die real easy if you don't constantly take care of it. You have to intentionally like make it happen and do it on a regular basis. And so please please go out there and consciously create community. Go out and talk to people and connect with people and check on people and check on yourself. And maybe if you're having a self-care day and you know somebody else, and maybe they're not even having a bad day, but you care about them, so you're like, yo, you want to have a self-care day together? Or maybe I'm going to drink a beer, and I know that Jeff likes beer, so maybe I'll just video chat and be like, yo, let's have a beer together. That's creating community rather than just doing it by yourself. And those little steps help us build trust. They help us build allies. They help us build this thing that helps us get things done. And so, I mean, don't just do it to like get business partners, like care about people too. But yeah, talk to each other, meet each other, be friends. I think everybody here that I know, I think is a good person, and I think you guys would be good friends with each other. So. Jaime, what is a saguaro?
It's a type of cactus.
Okay, that's what I thought, but then I was like,
The Sonoran Desert.
okay, so I don't understand at all. What is that? What are you saying?
I said that saguaros.
Oh, okay. So they live for a long time. Okay.
They live for a long time.
Okay, I was like, do saguaro cactuses only grow in communities? I was like, what is? I don't get it. Okay, that's a nice sentiment.
I want to say with the potatoes, okay, some friendships can be spontaneous, so you can't expect what you're gonna get. So that's all I want to say on that. Defending my potatoes.
That should go on a t-shirt though. Like, ideas are not like potatoes. You gotta like nurture them. They won't just grow on the ground.
Yeah, and then like when Jaime and Rocky become like national social justice activists, and they get up on stage and they have that shirt on, and everybody's like, oh, that must be a social justice shirt, and then Michelle's in the back like, I hate these guys. Another step towards creating community has been made. So, I mean, if we don't have anything to talk about, this is supposed to go on till 8 o'clock-ish, if it's like a really good conversation, but please don't feel pressured to stay here. It's not like every extra minute you stay here proves that you're a bigger activist or something like that. Just that you guys are showing up, I think is great. So,
I guess it could be interesting for us to maybe think about real quick before we all go, maybe some questions we have had about how things have been going, or just questions that have arisen as we've been conversing with people, or thinking about these larger issues.
like questions that we've asked ourselves, or people asking us questions?
Or I guess something that we can think of for next time, because I did like when you mentioned, like, oh, like what makes a race? I don't know. I think for me, I am always wondering, like, I don't like. I guess my thing is I'm always wondering, like, what are really, really tangible things that we can all do that also abide by quarantine and are going to, help in the long term, the future. I mean, I always think policy, but then it is sometimes kind of overwhelming. Then you wonder, like, how much policy can I participate in? And then when I can't, what can I, I don't even think that's a full question. Those are just thoughts that are running around in my head.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts, and I have a lot of questions. That's like just me on a daily basis for everything. It's not like special social justice thoughts, but because even like the how does somebody become a racist thing, that's to me the same question as how does somebody become a Christian. And I'm not trying to say Christians are racists, but in most cases, people subscribe to long-term or deep-seated belief systems because they grew up in an environment that highly supported it in a lot of different ways. And to say like, you need to stop being a racist is to me the same thing as saying like, hey, you need to drop your religion. And it's like, nobody's gonna, that method I feel like will almost never work, because nobody's gonna drop their religion because you knocked on their door and said like, you're wrong, stop. But I would say I think a good question actually, Michelle, would be I think because the reason I think we started this was kind of to give this space that we can come together and build community, and also kind of figure out ways to go out into the community and kind of propagate the ideas that we're coming up with here. And so in terms of activism, I think can be a word that can be kind of scary, because it makes you think you got to organize these big events, or you got to like um, do mean things to politicians to pressure them into whatever. But you can do that, and that's activism. But there's a lot of, like, what we're doing right now is activism, where we're thinking and we're trying to set ourselves up. And so I would challenge people to kind of think over the week, like, what is important to act on. And like, let's say George Floyd, like, he was killed, and that's, I don't think that's a good thing. But what actions do you make for that to not happen as often or never happen again? Like, what do you actually do? And I think this is part of that, where we talk and we get people to understand, so people can think when they're in emotional situations. I think changing our policy, I think informing people, and protesting is a way of informing people. But what are the ways, like, what are the problems we're really trying to address?
Mhm.
And what are the ways that we're thinking can help? What are some ideas that we have? And maybe, hey, that's a crazy idea, and maybe we shouldn't do that because it's bad. But also, maybe it's like, I had this really good idea, but I don't even know if it's realistic. And you say it to a group of people, and we're like, I could do that. Yeah, I have some tables and chairs. And then Michelle's like, oh yeah, I have a microphone, and you can like put it. But if you never bring the idea forward, then maybe it never happens. So maybe like brainstorm and think, if you could do activism your way to affect change, what are you trying to affect change for? Like, what are you here for? And then how would you do it if you were the person that got to come up with the rules and the regulations? Like, how would you do it in your way?
I love that. Yeah, that's great. I think that'd be great.
So, and then
Thank
talk.
you for putting those thoughts into, yeah.
I'm telling you, like, I think that's the thing that's like my contribution to society, is just like thinking, and then making places for other people to think. I'm not a very like, hey everybody, I built a spaceship. Hey everybody, like, I don't know, like, I made inexpensive diapers for single moms. Like, I'm more like, yeah, let's think. So this, like, if I could do anything, it would be this, and that's why I did it. So what would you guys do? It doesn't have to be a big thing. It doesn't have to be an expensive thing. And it could be an expensive thing. A lot of times people come to me with ideas they think are expensive, and I'm like, we could do that for $13. And so don't push yourself down. Don't make excuses like, oh, that could never happen. People would never agree to that. Oh, that's too expensive. Oh, that would take too much time. Like, you don't know that till you look into it, because you're doing the same thing that we're kind of trying to talk against, where you're not doing your research. You're not looking into the idea. You're just making decisions based on the surface level. So let's have some ideas and let's chat about it. And then maybe we can come up with a cool project.
Sounds like a plan.
Also, invite people to come to this, especially the people that are saying things that you disagree with. Invite those people twice as hard as you invite the people that you think, oh, this person would totally love this echo chamber of thoughts that agree with them. Those people are great. You should invite them. But especially the people that are going to be like, crazy idea, outlandish thing, offensive. Invite those people. They're the people that I feel like we should talk to. They're the people, like, even if they don't learn anything, if you always separate yourself, you create the polarization. You create what we have today with the Democrats and the Republicans, which, it's okay to be different, but it's not okay to like separate because you're different. like talk to each other. You both have good ideas, you both have perspectives, and we can both learn from each other. So please invite people. This will be next Thursday, same time, same place. I'll put out a flyer this weekend. But I think that's very, very important. Not just to make my events more popular, but to help the world. Anybody else have any questions that they think would be good to like think about or ponder during the week?
Well, one question I just had that came to mind is like, I was wondering if like this term is overused or does it still have meaning? That's the term woke.
Woke?
Yeah, because it's like obviously it started as one thing, but like it gets used so many times that like is it something that's still does it still have substance or is it something now that's just kind of like it's just generic? Is it does it mean something now to actually people or is it just kind of like played out?
Okay. What do you think about that? What is woke? How can I maybe in the future and have a convo on the intersection of. Is this pointed at something in particular, Jaime?
No.
I feel like this is very specific.
The article actually brought up a really good point. It's not. It was just about like what to do when the owner of a taco stand is very racist, but you love those tacos.
Oh, that's actually a really interesting thought. I think.
Yeah, like what do you
Actually,
do?
Nikki and I were talking about that yesterday. Where you don't like someone's ideas, but you like their products.
Yeah.
And does the fact that someone's ideas or beliefs conflict with yours make their art worse?
Was this about J.K. Rowling?
No, it wasn't.
Ah, okay.
But
I
like,
know a lot of people who have that debate like passionately about.
that's actually super good. Thank you for bringing that up. I think that's a good conversation to have. I'm gonna read this article. I may post an article in the comments wherever those are for you.
Good read.
Okay, I'm gonna check that out. That's a good one. Like to actually talk about. I feel like I have some avant-garde opinions about that. So we'll have a good discussion. I'm gonna write that there. What to do when Okay, I can post these questions later on my Instagram as kind of like a little stir the potter, and then it might encourage other people to come and blast me with their opinions. So yeah, thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions or things that are good food for thoughts?
Thank you, Jordan.
Okay.
Thank you for hosting this, seriously, though. And thank you for putting these questions together and for everyone contributing. I think this is great. I have the article open already. I'm going to read that when we're done.
Cool. Okay. Well, it seems like we're kind of winding down. So I will say, I hope to see you guys next week. I hope you guys stay safe and don't go and do something that gets you hurt. Yeah, have a good week. If you need someone to talk to, you can always DM me. I'm someone you can talk to outside of this, if you know how to reach me. But you don't have to be someone that knows me personally to need someone to talk to. So hope you guys have a good week. I'll see you later. This has been #Hurt.
Thanks, Jordan.
I'll see you guys later.
Bye, everybody.